Long before empires imposed borders, minted coins, or wrote laws into stone, something quieter stitched the Mediterranean together. Price, not armies, not flags, not decrees, just the persistent arithmetic of exchange. By the time Rome extended its roads and legions across the sea, merchants had already solved a problem Rome would later claim as its own. They had transformed a fractured, hostile, multilingual coastline into a single economic field where goods meant roughly the same thing, whether bought in the Levant or sold at the Pillars of Heracles. And the architects of that transformation were not kings, they were traders. Welcome to a history where markets move first, where money, power, and trust collide, and nothing is ever as simple as it appears. To grasp how disruptive this was, you have to imagine the Mediterranean around 12 centuries before Christ. This was not an integrated world. It was instability as a baseline. Small city-states competed for survival. Kingdoms fought over harbors. Pirates haunted open water. There was no shared legal code, no common currency, no authority capable of enforcing agreements beyond local walls. Most people lived and died close to home, and strangers were liabilities, not opportunities. By every reasonable assumption, trade at scale should have collapsed entirely, and yet, by the opening centuries of the first millennium BCE, goods were circulating across the Mediterranean with a reliability that defied the politics of the age. Tin traveled from the western edge of Iberia, copper moved steadily out of Cyprus, timber, dyes, glass, and finely worked metals passed through ports that shared no ruler, no language, and no law but shared an understanding of value. What made this possible was not conquest, it was coordination. The people who engineered this system were the Phoenicians, not emperors, not empire builders. They commanded no mass armies, enforced no universal laws, and ruled no unified territory. Their power came from something far more fragile and far more resilient: connection. Phoenician life centered on narrow coastal cities like Tyre, Sidon, and Byblus. These cities were exposed by design. They lacked deep agricultural land. They had limited manpower. They could not endure prolonged war. Survival depended on movement, ships, routes, and relationships that extended far beyond city walls. If trade stalled, the city withered. That reality shaped every decision they made. Without force, they relied on trust. And trust, once scaled, becomes structure. Before prices aligned, behavior did. In a world without courts or cross-border enforcement, commerce depended entirely on repetition. A dishonest merchant might profit once and then vanish from the network forever. Ports communicated, traders compared notes, reputation traveled faster than cargo. Trust was not ethical, it was transactional. Reliability meant access. Dishonesty meant exclusion, and exclusion meant economic extinction. In such a system, consistency was not optional, it was survival. Once those trust networks solidified, price differences began shrinking on their own, not because anyone ordered it, because competition demanded it. Phoenician traders specialized in goods whose value was widely understood. Metals essential for bronze, timber for ships, silver measured by weight, not authority. These were functional commodities, not symbolic ones. When a price imbalance appeared, traders moved. Goods flowed from abundance to scarcity. Every profitable gap attracted rivals, and every rival compressed the margin. Over time, extreme pricing became impossible to sustain. Markets enforced discipline where rulers could not. This wasn't policy, it was pressure, and it worked. This mechanism has a modern name, arbitrage, but the logic is ancient. Buy where value is lower, sell where it is higher, repeat until the difference disappears. The Phoenicians did not invent arbitrage, they lived inside it. And as they moved goods, price volatility collapsed. A merchant in Carthage could not demand wildly inflated prices for copper if competitors knew its cost elsewhere. A port could not isolate itself economically when ships could bypass it entirely. Geography no longer guaranteed control, mobility erased insulation. There was no central authority dictating prices, no council setting standards. Alignment emerged organically. The traders who adapted to market reality survived. Those who clung to local distortions disappeared. Efficiency selected its winners quietly, but the Phoenicians' true advantage wasn't ships or metals, it was information. They knew which harvests failed, which mines flooded, which wars disrupted routes. In a world where news moved only as fast as sale and rumor, early knowledge was leverage. This allowed them to act before others understood what was happening. They didn't merely respond to prices, they anticipated them. By redirecting supply early, they softened shocks across regions. Shortages were mitigated, surpluses were absorbed. Extremes were dampened before they became crises. Over time, producers adapted. Farmers, miners, and craftsmen stopped pricing goods purely on local conditions. They began thinking in wider terms, what the Mediterranean market would tolerate. Expectations synchronized. Coastal economies aligned first. Inland regions lagged behind. What emerged was unprecedented. An economic system that ignored borders. Political fragmentation remained, but prices spoke a shared language. The Mediterranean became legible, predictable, tradable. The Phoenicians never ruled this space, but they rendered it functional. And that distinction matters. Because economic integration does not require political unity, often it precedes it. History tends to reverse this order. Empires are credited with creating markets. In reality, markets often prepare the ground for empire. And once value stabilizes across regions, something else begins to happen. Power starts paying attention. When prices stabilize, trade accelerates. When trade accelerates, profits grow. And when profits grow predictably, states notice, because predictable value is legible, and legible value is taxable. This is where the Phoenician system reached both its height and its weakness. Greek city-states were among the first to formalize what merchants had been doing informally for generations. They introduced stamped coinage not to invent value, but to certify it. A coin was silver by weight, wrapped in political authority. The market already knew the price. The state simply claimed oversight. Rome perfected this transition. It did not create Mediterranean trade, it inherited it. Routes were established, prices aligned, networks functioning. What Rome added was forced soldiers to secure lanes, laws to formalize contracts, and taxation to extract value from flows merchants had built without permission. This is the paradox of Phoenician success. By making markets efficient, they made them governable. Their system didn't fail. It succeeded so completely that it attracted control. As states moved in, informal trust gave way to institutions. Reputation yielded to regulation. Weighed metal became stamped currency. Negotiation gave way to obligation. Merchants adapted, some prospered, but autonomy shrank. Markets had unified the Mediterranean before empires ever could, but empires decided who benefited most from that unification. And the pattern did not end there. The architecture persists. Today, there is no global government, yet prices converge worldwide. Oil, grain, metals, shipping costs adjust across continents. Disruptions ripple outward instantly. Value is still coordinated by networks, not borders. Trust, liquidity, and information still move faster than politics. Those closest to information adapt first. Those farthest feel the shock last. Nothing fundamental has changed, only the scale. And just as in the ancient Mediterranean, power never vanished. It adjusted its position. States stopped fighting over land and began taxing movement. Institutions learned to govern circulation rather than territory, and individuals found themselves operating inside systems that feel vast, impersonal, and increasingly difficult to influence. This is the unintended legacy the Phoenicians left behind. Power does not originate markets, markets manufacture power. Those who define how value is measured rarely need to rule directly. They shape outcomes indirectly, quietly. And once economic systems reach a certain scale, no single force truly controls them. They can only guide them, extract from them, or insulate themselves against their volatility. Empires rise convinced they command exchange. Exchange survives by adapting around empires. That distinction is why economic history isn't merely a record of the past. It's a map of recurring patterns. The same mechanisms that aligned prices across ancient sea lanes now operate through global finance faster, broader, and far less visible. If you understand how prices converge, if you see who moves first when they shift, and if you recognize that coordination always comes before authority, you stop confusing stability with security. History doesn't loop neatly, but misunderstanding, it carries a cost. Systems don't fail loudly, they fail quietly, and then all at once. If this reframed how you think about markets, power, and control, subscribe. History still explains the present if you know where to look.